Alphonse Al Capone was born on January 17, 1899, in Brooklyn, New York. He was the son of Italian immigrants, Gabriele, a barber, and Teresa, a seamstress. Life in Brooklyn at the turn of the century was not easy. The streets were crowded, noisy, and dangerous. Families like the Capones struggled to make ends meet, working long hours just to put food on the table. For young Al, the neighborhood was a school of survival. He learned quickly that the world didn't reward kindness or obedience. It rewarded toughness, cunning, and the ability to fight for what you wanted. School did little to challenge him. Capone struggled with reading and writing, and his temper often got the better of him. At the age of 14, after striking a teacher in frustration, he dropped out. From that moment, the streets became his classroom, and crime became his curriculum. Every punch thrown, every fight survived, and every small scam executed taught him lessons no school ever could. He quickly understood how loyalty, intimidation, and fear could control people. By his early teens, Capone had joined local street gangs. These groups controlled neighborhoods, fought rival gangs for territory, and earned money through theft and extortion. Capone distinguished himself not just through brute strength, but through sharp intelligence. Older gang leaders noticed his ability to organize, his natural leadership, and, most importantly, his willingness to enforce rules with violence when needed. It was during this time that he earned a permanent mark on his identity. One night, while working as a bouncer at a bar, Capone insulted a man who did not take kindly to the remark. The man slashed Capone across the left cheek with a knife, leaving 3 deep scars. From that day forward, he was known as Scarface. Though he hated the name, it enhanced his reputation. The scars told the world he was dangerous, a man to be feared, a symbol of survival and toughness. Capone's fortunes changed when he met Johnny Torrio, a seasoned Chicago gangster involved in illegal alcohol, gambling, and prostitution. Torrio saw in Capone a rare combination of intelligence and raw power. Under Torrio's guidance, Capone learned that crime could be organized, structured, almost like a business. Violence was a tool, not just an impulse. Loyalty could be bought and controlled, and fear could be wielded like currency. In 1919, Capone made the move to Chicago at Torrio's invitation. The city was ripe with opportunity for ambitious criminals. Chicago was a bustling metropolis filled with corrupt politicians, eager businessmen, and a population hungry for entertainment, alcohol, and escape. Around the same time, the United States enacted Prohibition, banning the manufacture, sale, and transport of alcohol. Overnight, a legal product became a highly valuable black market commodity. Torrio and Capone were perfectly positioned to capitalize on this sudden shift. Capone began as a bodyguard and enforcer for Torrio. He ensured compliance, protected shipments, and handled rival gangs with efficiency and brutality. But he quickly proved he was more than muscle. Capone displayed a keen sense for organization, for strategy, and for managing people. Within a few years, he was running large portions of the operation, overseeing smuggling, distribution, and even political influence. As Prohibition took hold in the 1920s, alcohol became an illicit treasure. Speakeasies, illegal bars hidden in basements and back rooms, sprang up across Chicago. Torrio and Capone supplied them with smuggled liquor from Canada, hijacked shipments, and even manufactured their own alcohol. The money flowed in. Capone's reputation grew. He was ruthless, yet charming. He could shake a man down with one hand while offering help to the poor with the other. By the mid-1920s, Capone was already a feared and respected figure. He understood that power was not only built through violence, but also through influence. He cultivated relationships with politicians and police officers, often paying them to look the other way. He gave generously to the community, funding soup kitchens and charitable events. To some, he was a hero. To others, he was a monster hiding behind a smile. In 1925, Capone's mentor, Johnny Torrio, was shot in an assassination attempt by rival gang members. Fearing for his life and exhausted by the constant violence, Torrio decided to retire. leaving the empire in Capone's hands. At just 26 years old, Al Capone became the most powerful gangster in Chicago. His empire stretched across the city. He controlled alcohol, gambling, prostitution, and political corruption. Thousands of men answered to him. Millions of dollars flowed through his hands. Capone had transformed from a street fighter in Brooklyn to the king of the Windy City's underworld. With power came visibility and danger. Capone's life was glamorous, yet precarious. He lived in luxury, surrounded by bodyguards, mansions, and lavish cars. Yet each day could have been his last. Rival gangs constantly plotted against him. Betrayal lurked around every corner, even among those he considered loyal. Capone's response was simple: strike first, strike hard, and leave no doubt about who was in control. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre of 1929 became the defining moment of Capone's public image. 7 members of a rival gang were lined up against a wall in a Chicago garage and gunned down with machine guns. The brutality shocked the nation. The massacre cemented Capone's reputation as a man who ruled with terror. Yet even as the public recoiled in horror, Capone's power seemed unshakable. Law enforcement struggled to bring him down. Witnesses were too afraid to testify. Police officers were often bribed. Prosecution seemed impossible. Capone became virtually untouchable. His arrogance grew. He openly flaunted his wealth, threw extravagant parties, and charmed the press and public alike. Yet the federal government was determined. They found a new approach. If they couldn't convict him for murder, they could convict him for tax evasion. A team of federal agents, led by Elliot Ness and famously known as the Untouchables, was formed to tackle Capone. These agents refused bribes, conducted daring raids, and dismantled Capone's operations piece by piece. Their relentless pursuit brought Capone's empire to the edge of collapse. In 1931, Capone was finally tried for tax evasion. Confident he could manipulate the system, he underestimated the strategy of the prosecution. The jurors were secretly switched to prevent tampering, and for the first time, Capone found himself outmaneuvered. He was convicted and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. His empire began to crumble without him at the helm. Capone was transferred between prisons, including the notorious Alcatraz, where he lost all power and influence. Stripped of his empire, his wealth, and his authority, Capone became a mere shadow of his former self. Years of syphilis, stress, and untreated illness ravaged his mind and body. The man who once ruled Chicago with an iron fist was reduced to a frail, paranoid figure. Released in 1939 due to his failing health, Capone returned to Florida, living quietly in the shadow of the legend he had created. His influence had vanished, but his name remained infamous. On January 25, 1947, Al Capone died of a stroke and pneumonia at the age of 48. His death marked the end of an era. Yet the story of Scarface lived on, a cautionary tale of ambition, crime, and the fleeting nature of power. Al Capone's life reminds us that crime and corruption can create vast empires, but they also attract relentless danger. He was both a giver and a killer, a family man and a ruthless boss, a man admired by some and feared by all. His rise and fall illustrate how ambition, talent, and opportunity can combine with violence to produce extraordinary power, but also how the law, patience, and justice eventually catch up. Even decades later, Al Capone's name remains synonymous with organized crime, proving that some legends are impossible to forget, and that the line between respect and fear is always razor thin.